Hi everybody, my name is Victoria. Welcome back to my channel. Bailey is here as well today. I'm very excited that I'm sitting on the floor with her and demanding my attention. Today, Bailey and I would like to talk to you about my 2024 reading year and my stats, my favorite books of the year. I did make a top 10 reading list, and so I'm going to go through that top 10 from 10 to 1. Bailey, sit down. So in 2024, I read a total of 28 books, and the page count came out to be 11,173 pages, which I think is a little bit under what I read in 2023. So 2024 was honestly on par with 2023, but maybe just 1,000 pages less. So about my average, I would say, since having a baby and having more responsibilities, I felt like I did read more. My kid is 2 now, so I feel like I definitely read more than when he was a newborn, but apparently I read less. Storygraph is telling me that I read 17 fantasy books, which sounds about right. I did feel like this was a really heavy fantasy year for me. And then it says 7 classics, and I think it's counting some of those classics as also fantasy classics, like Lord of the Rings. I did a reread of Lord of the Rings, and so I think it's counting some of those crossovers. So these numbers that I'm telling you are not gonna like add up to 28 because some of them are crossover genres. And then historical 3, I'm assuming that means historical fiction, and then sci-fi 3, which that adds up. Romance 3, that does not add up. I'm not sure what it's counting as. I can think of 2 that it might be counting for romance. I'm not sure about the third one. And then nonfiction, I had to count because Storygraph didn't tell me, but I read 4 nonfiction books, 1 manga, only 1, and then 2 middle grade books. And that might not be all of the genres represented, but I think that's the bulk of it. Definitely heavy on the fantasy and classics at the forefront, and then a smattering of other things after that. My most read author was Brandon Sanderson, also not a surprise to me. I read 7 books by Brandon Sanderson in 2024. So yeah, that was a big chunk of my reading was Sanderson. My average rating of books was 4.25, which I feel like is high. I guess I didn't have a lot of books that I really disliked, which is good because that means I'm picking better books for myself. So I'm excited to learn that. Yeah, but I also felt like I didn't have a ton of 5-star books. I felt like I had a more middle of the road books, like 3 and 4 stars, especially 4. I think I have the most 4-star books this year. And I didn't feel like I had a ton of 5-star. I think some of my rereads are skewing that because anything that I've reread was most likely a 5-star. And so I think that pulled it up because I did a lot of rereading. A third of my reading this year was rereading. And out of 28 books, that's a lot of rereads. And then the moment we've all been waiting for, my top 10 books of 2024. Starting with number 10, snuck it in there right at the end, but I'm going to put Christmas at Thompson Hall by Anthony Trollope on this list. And I feel a little weird including it, but I just enjoyed it so much. It was a short story / novella. I'm not sure which one it's qualified as, but it was just so much fun and delightful, and also my first Trollope that I've ever read. And so I couldn't not mention it just because it was enjoyable from beginning to end, and it has inspired me to get on the Trollope train and read some of his bigger works. So Christmas at Thompson Hall follows a couple who's traveling, which I was kind of surprised to find that this couple, like, we are following a couple traveling. I feel like you don't see that a lot in Victorian novels of like the journey somewhere. We have, I figured Christmas at Thompson Hall meant we would be at Thompson Hall for the most of the book. And actually, you're following the journey getting to Thompson Hall. And there are some mishaps along the way. What I didn't know about this going in was how lighthearted it would be. It doesn't really give you much of a hint of what this book is about. And I'm not going to spoil it for you because I feel like the delight is finding out what the main plot is exactly. That is the delight of this book. And once I figured out what this book was really doing, I was just so delighted and had so much fun with it. It was just a lovely little Christmas splice. In number 9 is Shark Teeth by Sherri Winston. This I read for middle grade March. I actually read it with my Patreon book club, which I have since disbanded because I just didn't feel like I have the time to run my own book club and put the energy into it that I want to. But this was a delight. I wouldn't have picked this up probably unless we had read it with my book club. Christy from Christy Lewis Dostoevsky in Space recommended it, and it was a knock out of the park kind of read for me and for her. I don't think I loved it quite as much as her. But I do really think this book is worth your time, and I wanted to spotlight it on this list. Shark Teeth is a middle grade novel following Sharkita, who I think she's around 10 or 11 years old, maybe 12. I don't remember exactly her age, but she's basically a kid who's been in and out of the foster system. Her mom is like having another chance at being a good mom, and so she and her siblings have gone in and out between foster families and then coming back with her mom. And so when you meet Sharkita, she's back with her mom, and you're kind of seeing the dynamics that are happening at home, and then also the ways that Sharkita is kind of trying to keep her family together and kind of like be a grown-up in this family situation of hers with a single mother who is struggling with her identity as a mom. And so you follow Sharkita and see what her school life is like, her friend group. What I really liked about this was that she had such a solid friend group and like very supportive friends. It was nice to see that represented in the book, that like she has really a positive school culture. The adults at school were a positive influence on her life, which I feel like you don't always see, like a positive public school representation. I'm a public school teacher, so I really appreciate that, because I think public schools do, while they do have many problems, I feel like in the media, public schools are this horrible thing, and for the most part, they're made of people who really care and are really doing good work, and they just don't get showcased enough when a public school has a good environment. And so I really liked that aspect of this, the positivity around her life and like the support system that she has and the community that comes around Sharkita. And so I really liked Shark Teeth and would recommend it. In spot number 8 is going to be Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. I am actually currently reading the other stories in this volume, and so that's why there's still a bookmark in there, but Cranford was the one I read first with Tiffany's Patreon book club. And Cranford is just a cozy read. It's very also based on community. I guess that's a theme I like in books. It's about the community of Cranford. It's a little bit more like day to day, I guess slice of life would be the way of describing it. But it also has a plot that we're following through the chapters that continues. And so I just really love Elizabeth Gaskell's character work and her themes, her message of Cranford, was just really heartwarming. There is some sadness and tragedy in Cranford, so I feel like it's a little bit more of a downer at times. It's a very quiet work, but what I really liked was the way the community interacts and how they come together, how they support one another, and the final resolution of everything was just really sweet and cozy and lovely. So Cranford is going in spot number 8. In spot number 7, I don't have a physical copy of it, but it was The Case Against the Sexual Revolution by, who wrote it? I forgot. Louise Perry, maybe? I'll put a picture. But this was recommended to me by Christy from Christy Lewis Dostoevsky in Space. This was, I think, her favorite book of last year, of 2023, maybe, or one of her favorite books. I know for sure, at least one of her favorite books. This is a nonfiction book that talks about the ways that our culture portrays sex in the media, the ways that women are sexualized, and kind of the evolution of that. She kind of goes from like Hugh Hefner to current days. She really focuses a lot on Hugh Hefner and like the culture that he created and kind of the sexual liberation that we see in modern times. And her argument is from a non-Christian standpoint, first of all, and I found it really interesting. The thing that Christy and I both really appreciate about this book is that she comes to very Christian worldview conclusions without being a Christian herself, just based on the practicality. Does the sexual revolution have positive benefits for women, and the ways in which it has really hurt women quite a bit? And so she kind of like puts against each other the strides and also the downfalls of how sex is portrayed in the media, how women are supposed to carry themselves, and how that has evolved over time. I don't feel like I'm describing it super well, but I will say that if you have any interest in this at all, the audiobook is pretty good too. It's narrated by the author and she does a pretty good job of it. So I do recommend trying that out because it's kind of very like podcasty, at least the way that I felt my experience was with the audiobook. So actually Christy gifted me the audiobook to this, I think for my birthday. And so that's how I ended up reading this here. And so I do think it is worth a listen or a read. I do think that it's really cool how she looks at, is this actually good for women? Is what we have done to women a good thing? And her conclusions are very interesting. So I would recommend you trying this out if you have any interest in this topic. In spot number 6, I am putting The Alloy of Law by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Wax and Wayne, no, it's not a trilogy, it's a quartet now. And Mistborn Era 2, or is it more than a quartet? I don't even know at this point. I cannot keep up with Brandon Sanderson. This takes place 300 years after the events of Mistborn Era 1. I have not yet continued in this series of Mistborn Era 2, but I definitely will because I found Wax and Wayne to be just really lovable and a fun duo to follow. This reminds me a lot of a Sherlock Holmes kind of duo. It's got like Sherlock Holmes, Indiana Jones kind of mashup with Brandon Sanderson's magic system and Mistborn magic system, but also there's some new elements to the magic system that have evolved over 300 years. And so this felt like it would be a great movie. Actually, I know people talk about like possibly Era 1 getting a movie of Mistborn, but I think these would be better movies than Era 1 in my personal opinion. It just is a book that kind of reads like a movie. So I would love to see that someday, and I think Wax and Wayne would be great on the big screen. I think they'd be a really charismatic duo. And so the Alloy of Law was just really fun. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next with these new lovable characters. In spot number 5, this was my very last book that I finished in 2024, and it made it quite high on the list, and that was Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, of course. So much Brandon Sanderson on this list. Warbreaker is an older book from Brandon Sanderson, but one that I had not read yet, so I had to fill in the holes before I continued with my Stormlight Archives reread. I know that there's characters in Warbreaker that make an appearance in Words of Radiance, Oathbringer, in the Stormlight Archives books, and so I knew about the characters in the Stormlight Archives books that were crossovers, but now I just have more of a picture of like where they come from, the planet they come from, what happens on their world, and also the magic system, which has some strong ties to the magic system on Roshar in the Stormlight Archives. This book also brings so much more Cosmere lore into my knowledge, and so I feel like there's so much in here, and I know he's also talked about maybe continuing in this series. I would love for him to continue in this series, actually. I think that would be awesome. Maybe he will someday, but yeah, Warbreaker just shot up onto this list in spot number 5. Also, I love Nightblood in this book. Nightblood is just such a unique take on a kind of a companion, but it's like a weapon, and also is like super dangerous, but also like lovable. Like how do I love a weapon? I don't know. But I do. I love Nightblood. So just some unique and fun things that Brandon Sanderson does in this that I'm glad to have read. And also I feel like my Cosmere knowledge has grown so much after reading this. So there's definitely a big chunk of that to know from Warbreaker. So yeah, I'm really glad I finally read this one. The politics, the religion, super interesting. I think that's probably the most interesting part of Warbreaker for me was the political intrigue and the religion and the politics and how they blend, and how they're, of course, not separate things at all. So yeah, really liked Warbreaker. Do recommend. I feel like I'm probably the last person on the planet to read this, but if you haven't read Warbreaker, it's a nice Sanderson standalone, which we don't get a lot. All the series in the world with Sanderson, but it's nice to have a standalone sometimes. In spot number 4, I have The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. I finally read this classic sci-fi novel, and people told me that I was probably gonna like it, and I really, really did. This has a cast that is very wacky and zany, and it's not really about like the characters as much as it is about the wackiness and the ideas that are explored, the science that he explores, and the British humor that just I thought was so funny. I really like British humor in general, and like if you like the kind of like Monty Python humor, just like very silly, it airs on the side of silly, then this is the book for you. And so I had a feeling I was gonna really jive with it, and I very much did. I am continuing in the series, but slowly. I have read the second one also. I didn't feel like the second one was quite as good, but I also enjoyed the second one. But I'm putting the first one here as the one to represent the list. So spot number 4, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I love the absurdity, and definitely I'm glad to have read this classic. We are getting to the cream of the crop. So one of the earliest books that I read this year in January was The Bullet Swallower by Elizabeth Gonzalez James. And I'm so sad because I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this, and it really is so worth your time, and I just feel like it didn't get the attention that it really deserves. It did get attention, but not to the degree that I want it to get. So this is a Western, which I almost never read Westerns, but this one piqued my interest with the opening. Alvarez Antonio Sonoro was born with gold in his eyes. The gold was sharp and it stung him so that he blinked uncontrollably and always carried a vial of salted water in his pocket. Obviously, from the beginning, we figure out, okay, this has magical realism. So it's a Western with magical realism with sort of a fantastical element to it. And I just loved it. I believe she was probably inspired, I'm guessing, she was probably inspired by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years of Solitude. So this is sort of inspired in that kind of style, but it's her modern take on it. And so a few things I loved about this, the themes of this family. It's also a family saga, and there's like kind of a curse that's followed this family. So the themes of the family saga and the family curse and what that means for the family. Also, I loved the gritty setting and the writing. I thought her portrayal of this setting was excellent. It tackles border politics. It tackles intergenerational trauma. It tackles racism and colonialism and what that does to a people and what happened to the Mexican people at this time. It's set in like the turn of the century, 1895 is as earliest as we go. And then we go between 1895 and 1964. And I just thought this was so beautifully written. Elizabeth Gonzalez James has writing chops. I'm definitely going to check out her works. It's more on the literary side, so I would say like literary historical fiction with magical realism. If any of those things are ringing a bell for you, give it a go. I just thought it was so well done and so well constructed. The only thing I didn't really love was the epilogue. It's one of those things where I was like, we didn't need the epilogue. I think we should have left it where it was, but whatever. I just kind of ignore it now. But The Bullet Swallower was such a great read. Give it a go. One of my favorite reads of 2024. In spot number 2, I am putting Yumi and the Nightmare Painter by Brandon Sanderson. This is a little bit more of a romance for him. It's still not like the main thing. The main thing is still the fantasy and the world, but it's just that the romance is a little bit more of a center than it normally is with Sanderson. But I felt like it was still a good balance of like being intrigued by the fantasy world and what's going on there. What I loved about this book was Yumi as a character. Also the themes that we explore of art and what does it mean to be an artist? How do we interact with art? What is art? He delves into all of these like very philosophical things in here. And the romance is also cute and sweet. It's definitely more of like a friendship turned romance. And also I just love the setting, the magic system in this, and this copy is gorgeous too. Side note, but yes, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful edition. So Yumi became a favorite book of mine in 2024. And we've come to number 1. In spot number 1 is the very first book that I finished in 2024, which is funny that it became in spot number 1, but that's Joy in Christ's Presence by C.H. Spurgeon. This book has just so much beautiful truth in it. This is written by Charles Spurgeon, who was a Victorian pastor and writer, very famous Victorian pastor, and he had a lot of challenges in his life, and I feel like this book is a little bit more on the reflective side for him of like sitting in pain and grief, and how do we find joy in the pain and the grief of life, because sometimes life is just really heavy and really hard, and just that joy that we have in Christ no matter what we're going through. And I feel like this is a book that I will revisit and read passages throughout my life, and I'm just so glad that I read it. I read it as part of Tiffany and Dia and Chrissy. They did a a read-along. They did a read-along of this in November, but I didn't finish it in November. I didn't finish it till January, but I'm so glad that I did, because it is a gem. It's a precious gem of a text. Just don't get this cover. It's the ugliest cover in the world. I don't know why they decided to make it like, I don't know, like an inspirational chick lit cover. I don't even know what to call it. But no, just ignore it. Ignore it. The cover, look at how many fonts are we using? All of them. The answer is all of them. Use all the fonts. Just the worst cover ever. But the best book that I read in 2024, bar none. Thank you so much for going on this journey, this little walk through 2024 with me. I really read some new favorites in 2024, and so I'm so grateful for that. It was overall a very good reading year, and I'm hoping for an even stronger one in 2025. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these books, if you have any thoughts on them. Have I convinced you to read any of these? I would love to know that. And if you want to share your favorite book of 2024, I would love to know, as I'm always looking for book recommendations. And if you like my content, don't forget to subscribe so that you can follow my journey into 2025 with me, and we can be reading buddies together. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Keep reading great books, and until next time, bye-bye.